Here's a test plan where we can get the product name and quantity. This is a nice plan because it's got our unexpected and boundary testing as part of the plan. Here's a screenshot showing some of my code. Please pause this video and see if you can create the number checker yourself. Note that you want to loop for testing purposes. Our not blank function has been recycled from MMF Project Zero. A reminder that your number checker needs to check for numbers that are more than 0. We're defaulting our number type to float. We've got some custom error messages. We then ask the question and check that it's more than 0. And of course, output an error if the input was invalid. When I call my number checker function, if I've got an integer, I need to specify the number type. If it's just a float, I could just ask the question. And if this were an assessment, it would be a great opportunity to put in a trialing slide. Remember, in your assessment, you need to have trialing to get achieved, and number checking trialing is something that you should be showing. And after my test plan and trialing slide, I have evidence of testing. The next step is to get the costs from the users. So I had a little bit of a think and compared what our variable expenses and fixed expenses might look like. For variable expenses, we have to have at least one item, but fixed expenses are optional, so we'd accept XXX as the first item. We also need to find out how many of the item are needed for variable expenses, but for fixed expenses, our amount would be 1. I've also thought that allowing the user to push enter if the amount needed is the same as the quantity of items being made, because that will make data entry a lot faster. For our variable expenses, we need the item, amount, price, and cost columns, but for our fixed expenses, we just need the item and cost column, and for both, we need a subtotal. Your next step is to create a variable expenses loop where you have to have at least one item before you put in the exit code. Here's a test plan that you could use. To help you write your code, take a peek at mine. I've got a component called expenses loop, and I've got my not blank function. I've got a number checking function, and then I've got an additional get expenses function where I'm taking in the expense type. For the variable costs, when I call that function, I'm feeding in the fact that it's variable expenses, and at the end of it, I can find out how many variable expenses I have. If you'd like, please pause this video and see if you can write the get expenses function yourself. So here's what I went with. Of course, I start with a docstring saying what the function does. And I've set up my all items list because I can easily return the list and see how many items it has. I'm also going to need that list later on when I make my panda. To begin, I get the item name, checking that it's not blank. Then, if the expense type is variable, and they've said XXX, and we have nothing in all items, we're going to say you need at least one item, and we're going to send them back to the start of the loop. Otherwise, if they say XXX, we're going to break. Remember that you need to add the name of each item to the items list, and outside the loop, we can return that list. Please create the code and then test it using the test plan on your screen, and you should be able to show that it works as expected. Here is our test plan for our fixed expenses. You should be able to edit the variable expenses code so that you can reuse the function for fixed expenses. Here's a hint for how you can quickly get your fixed costs. First, you can comment out your variable costs, and then you can create the code for the fixed costs. Obviously, once you have the code, you can comment it in and out for testing purposes. As this video is getting quite long, we're going to continue with this process in the next video.